Oh no. Good thing Ryan has insurance. Like a good neighbor, Gexco is here.
I think you dropped something.
Gex, can you help me?
This would be great for my collection. I'll take this, and this, and this.
Wait, you're supposed to help me.
Read a book.
Alright, it's tail time. Let's take a look at gaming's trash-talking gecko, Gex. Gex is known for being a PS1 mascot, but was originally intended to be the mascot for the 3DO. You all remember the 3DO, right? Right? No? Just me? Oh well. Funny to think that if the 3DO was actually successful, he may never have landed on a PlayStation or N64. Developed by Crystal Dynamics in 1995, Gex is a 2.5D platformer that stars the snarky reptile we all know and love. Gex has an unhealthy obsession with TV to the point where he actually gets sucked into it. In order to escape, Gex must travel through the Mediaverse and platform his way through many different genres of television and defeat the minions of the evil Rez. Honestly, I thought it would have been a funnier reference if they called it TV Land, but oh well. Throughout the game, Gex also makes countless references to 90s pop culture, so much so that he even has his own page on TV tropes. Some of these references are easy to pick out, like Terminator, Star Wars, or even other relevant video games at the time, like asteroids in one of the rocket levels. Heck, even the checkpoint is a Polaroid camera, printout and all. There's a lot of references that anyone who didn't live in the 90s will completely miss, but if you do know a Zoomer who gets all of the supermarket sweep references he makes, please let me know because I have a lot of questions for them. So the gameplay of Gex is still solid. The levels and controls are well designed and definitely stand the test of time. It did make me realize one thing about modern platformers though. In a lot of more recent platformers, when you land, you have to compensate for your landing by moving left or right a bit, but that is not the case here. In Gex, when you land, and you stick the landing. So trying to compensate will just get you killed, and it took me a bit to adjust. I also realized how much worse it was back in the day when someone would walk in front of the TV while playing something because my roommate kept doing it to my chagrin. Things were a lot harder and required a lot more precision back in the day. Gex has a couple of unique abilities as well, such as his bounce, tongue, and ability to climb on walls, both in the foreground and background. The ability to climb on walls makes for some less straightforward level designs, which I definitely liked. Levels also have various power-ups which give Gex several different abilities, such as speed, invulnerability, and different types of shots from his mouth. Gex can obtain these power-ups by eating the balls with his tongue, and alternatively, these items can be tail-whipped and destroyed in order to replenish health. I found it interesting to have a trade-up for either a power-up or for health. There are also good old button input cheats in this game if you feel so inclined to use them. Ordinarily, I say don't use them. But when you're trying to re-record footage because of tech issues, and you just want to be done, they really do help you get there a lot quicker. Just saying. As fun as this game is, it is not perfect. There are a few things that I did not like. For some reason, despite the PS1 having a memory card, Gex uses an antiquated password system to save, and an obscure one at that. In order to get a password, you have to find a cassette tape hidden in a level or beat a boss and you get a password at the end. Unfortunately, not every level has one, and it doesn't indicate whether or not a level has one, so you have to explore through the levels and hope that you find one. Sometimes just completing the level is also not enough. If you don't find all the required remotes to progress in the game, you have to go back in and keep exploring. This wasn't a persistent problem for me, but it was annoying a couple of times. While we're on the topic of levels, Gex continues to prove that water levels are just the worst. The ones in this game are just awful to get through. Controls in the water feel bad and it is frustrating to go through them. Lastly, the bosses in this game are just lame. The level bosses have really dumb designs and are very easy to beat. The only boss actually worth mentioning in this game is the final Rez fight. This fight is really well designed, and you have to utilize everything you've learned in the game in order to beat him, and it is hard. You have only 3 hits before you have to start over. Though there are a couple of parts that are easy to get past because you can just hide in the corner and dodge his attacks. Beating Rez gets Gex out of TV land, and he returns to his couch to keep watching TV, and you, the player, get to listen to the bop that is the Gex theme song. It's funny to me that the moral of this game is that watching too much TV is bad, but yet when you finish, Gex goes back to watching TV and wonders what's on HBO, and the premise is essentially the same for the sequels as well. Overall, Gex is a great time. The gameplay is solid, the music is decent, albeit repetitive, and the quips make the game entertaining even when you're getting frustrated. I personally still prefer the sequels since those are what I grew up with, but I definitely enjoyed my time with this game. Gex's console sequels are both 3D platformers, but their Game Boy counterparts are very resemblant of this game, so if you prefer the original, the Game Boy Color has more for you. If you enjoy classic platformers with a bit of a twist and a lot of heart put into it, give this a go and let the trash-talking quippy gecko flow into your ears.
After helping Nintendo develop Star Fox for the Super Nintendo, British game developer Argonaut Software wanted to focus on creating a platform game in 3D. After a rejected pitch to Nintendo to make Yoshi the star of the game, Argonaut changed their game build for a new IP with a new publisher, and Croc was born. Croc Legend of the Gobos was released in 1997 for PlayStation, Sega Saturn, and PC. I'm playing the PlayStation version here. Growing up in the 90s, Spyro the Dragon and Croc were my first introductions to games in the 3D space. I remember enjoying Croc, but not as much as Spyro. Croc is distinctly different, and it takes an interesting approach to 3D games when the concept was still in its infancy. You play as Croc, who is discovered by the Gobos as a baby and raised as one of their own. The evil sorcerer Baron Dante invades the Gobos' homeland and kidnaps nearly everyone. It's up to Croc to save the Gobos. There are 4 worlds to explore, each with their own theme, and a secret 5th world if you rescue every Gobbo. The goal of each level is to essentially reach the end while saving Gobos. Each level also has 5 colored crystals that unlock a bonus room with an extra puzzle. The structure of the game is what I think shines the best here. Croc is a platform puzzle game by design. Each level is sectioned off by doors or holes in the ground that make every room its own self-contained puzzle. Levels are not huge with boring overworlds or anything like that. Everything present here is by design, and there's no downtime between objectives. Everything is short and sweet and self-contained. While I say Croc is a platformer by design, it still has its fair share of early 3D control problems. Pressing left or right only shifts the direction Croc is moving, and pressing forward makes him accelerate like a freight train. This also becomes a bit of an issue when you are jumping, because you get to control your momentum in air slightly, so you have to be careful not to overextend your jump. Just as you get used to the floaty controls, the second world is ice-themed. You've gotta be kidding me. The L1 and R1 buttons help Croc sideways shuffle to line up jumps, and you have 3 different buttons for camera adjusting, plus the circle button for a 180-degree turn. Croc may have learned a thing or two from Lara Croft with all these movement and camera options. Combat in this game is honestly a joke. Enemies respawn very quickly, and you don't even need to engage with them to finish any of the levels. You can ground pound and also press square to swing your tail. Croc collects gems that act like rings for Sonic, but when you get hit they almost immediately despawn. With the touchy controls, it's impossible to collect your gems back before they are gone. Each world has 2 bosses, and they're kind of a joke too. Depth perception can be an issue because barely touching bosses can kill you. I understand the need for conflict and variety, but with the controls designed as they are, it makes combat feel like an afterthought. The level design lends a great way to show off the graphics without the use of fog or any issue with field of depth. The music is fitting, but nothing to write home about. However, I still do get the title theme stuck in my head. Croc would get a sequel a few years later, and both games have 2D platformer versions on the Game Boy Color. Croc Legend of the Gobos sold over 3 million units for the PlayStation, so it was very successful. Argonaut Software sadly does not exist anymore, with many of its developers leaving and joining Rocksteady Studios, the developers of the Batman Arkham games. Croc has interesting design and can be frustrating with its precise movement while leaving more to be desired outside its platforming. It may not be your first pick, but Croc is still fun for a look at early 3D game design.
Do you remember when we did PS1 arcade classics and Ryan said, "I am curious to see how later 3D Frogger games play because they're probably a decent experience." I knew this day would come, but I'm playing the Frogger game instead of Ryan. This game was suggested to me by one of my closest friends who told me he played and beat this game as a kid. I mean, if a kid could beat this, then surely I can too, right? Frogger Beyond was a 3D platformer that was published and developed by Konami in 2002 for Xbox and GameCube and PS2 in 2003. The story is basically Frogger growing up and goes from boy frog to adult frog. I never realized the lore went so deep. Eventually, Frogger meets up with the elder frogs and has to prove that he is skilled enough to be treated as a teenage frog. If only real life was that easy. Imagine that you show your teacher that you have to do your taxes and then they give you a certified adult badge. Now, let's talk about the controls of the game. This is where the majority of my gripes with the game comes from. For starters, I played this game on the GameCube, and that's fine and dandy. However, being forced to use the D-pad isn't cool. The tiny D-pad ended up making my thumb hurt after a few minutes of play, and I knew it would only get worse. Up, down, left, and right work exactly as expected, but now there's a twist. The shoulder buttons turn Frogger 90 degrees. This is a feature I would hate in no time. Let's say Frogger is facing to the right and I want to hop to the left. I have to rotate Frogger twice with either shoulder button to get him to face that way, as opposed to just hitting the left button, as that would make Frogger jump that direction instead. There are many ways the control for this game could have been implemented, but I did not like the way Konami has set it up. On top of all of this, I can't forget to mention about those one-touch deaths. Everybody loves those. Sure, there are some abilities that can be used to aid with those, but those cost coins, and coins aren't abundant. You also lose the coins when you have to use a continue, so it is hard to retain coins. I've gone through so many lives from not just the controls since I've touched on that, but the camera has made me miss jumps. A simple feature like moving the camera would fix that problem. The game doesn't even look or sound that great. It just feels like the game had a small budget and a Christmas launch window to dupe people who didn't know any better aside from the brand name. I feel slightly bad for my friend because I know that he enjoyed this title, but I had the opposite experience. I want my time invested in this game back, and once I got to the second world, I knew how to stop for my own mental health. I think the game is bad, but hey, more power to you if you like this. Now you know, Ryan, you should avoid this game.
You do?
It wasn't me.
I can't possibly get this graded now. This just went from a 9.8 to a 9.7. What are you doing to me?
It wasn't me. It was Gex. He was here. He tried.
Gex. Gex is a fictional character. Will.
No, you don't understand. He just appeared out of the door in thin air, and
Will.
He said he was gonna.
This is just like filming an episode of Mitchell at Ryan's house.